Hello, I'm Art, ex-family disgrace, ex-scapegoat, ex-black sheep, the so-called destroyer of mothers and families and the world while you're at it. And today I want to talk to you guys about what keeps us from healing our trauma after parental abuse, aside from the obvious, which is the parental abuse itself. I want to talk about the blind spots, patterns, and how to recognize them when they show up, so that you can stop doubting yourself and find closure and find the right path forward. And healing from being the family scapegoat is not simple, it's not linear, it's not a straight, clear path, because there's rarely any closure and there's rarely validation. And on top of dealing with your trauma, what we get, instead of healing from a community, from family members, from friends, what we get is smear campaigns, isolation, betrayal from the people who were supposed to protect us. We get morality lectures, from self-righteous empaths who insist that there's two sides to every story, even if, the abuse happened when you were just a child and never stopped as you reached adulthood, and it just continued cyclically. And, as an adult, you survived years and years and years of emotional abuse, psychological manipulation, verbal degradation, Many of us have endured physical violence, spiritual abuse disguised as self-righteousness, coercive control, sexual boundary violations that no one dares to acknowledge, especially in the family. There can be financial sabotage, social isolation, or just being completely neglected, treated as invisible, unless we're being blamed for the family dysfunction, then we were made very visible. I mean, the only thing that was extremely visible about us in our families was everything that was wrong with us, our flaws, the things that they tried to kill within us. And, I think that also one of the deepest wounds of all is the annihilation of our identity, the complete destruction, the dismantling, of our identity. Being told over and over again, directly or indirectly, that who we are as a person is wrong, and that what happened to us was something that we deserve because we're so evil. And we're told that our light and our truth and our very existence, is inconsequential in the bigger family picture because everybody else matters. Our abuser's life story, matters a lot more than the present moment in which they are severely abusing somebody else and passing on that generational trauma. And when we start recognizing the patterns for what they are, the trauma bonds, the guilt conditioning, the generational denial, this is when the healing can really start taking place. And I'm going to start by talking about misplaced empathy, because this is such a huge blocker to scapegoat healing. And this is about how empaths actually reinforce the scapegoat's trauma. Not all empaths, but I have seen this way too often to not talk about it. I mean, this is a recurring subject that keeps coming back again and again and again and again. When we think about empathy, we automatically associate it with goodness and kindness and compassion and selflessness, right? All beautiful words, and it's beautiful. But like everything in life, misplaced empathy can have a dark side. When empathy is misplaced, it will re-traumatize the scapegoat to a breaking point. Let's say an empath, someone who means well, who sees themselves as understanding and spiritual, and they meet your abusive caretaker, an abusive parent, okay? And this is the same parent who physically beat you, psychologically dismantled you, who competed with you for everything, okay? Everything. For your right to feel hurt when they were the ones who hurt you. For your right to be angry while they spent years turning family members against you and against each other, and while painting themselves as the victim. Because that parent speaks so calmly, and sounds so reasonable when they talk to strangers or family friends or like any outsider. And they're so good at playing the part of the wounded soul, that an empath might automatically start preaching to you that you only have one parent, that they had a hard childhood, and stop judging your parent because, they had a hard childhood, or they have a story, or, they only did their best, and so on. They'll tell you not to judge without knowing anything at all about your history, your trauma, or the sickness that you carried from years of abuse by those people, inflicted by those people. And they think, these people think that showing kindness, is enough for your abuser to start healing. And what they don't realize is that you tried that path thousands and thousands of times before. I mean, you grew up with that parent. You grew up with that caretaker, with that family member who abused you, As children, like newsflash, As children, none of us ever wanted to see our parents suffer from the get-go, Nobody wants to see, no child wants to see their parent suffer. And we tried everything. I know I did, and I know I think I can confidently say that all of you probably did at some point try. We didn't want to see our parents suffer, and we blamed ourselves for everything, for a huge portion of our lives, because we were children. And that's what children do. They blame themselves. And I know I tried every approach imaginable. I tried to be perfect. I tried to be quiet. I tried to be helpful. I tried to heal her. I tried to play her therapist. I tried to be forgiving, and I tried to earn this genuine connection. And every single time, the attacks returned, because every single time it wasn't enough. Because of course it wasn't enough. It's not in a child's power to heal an adult, but this is what they believe. Narcissistic parents will put their children in these caregiving roles, right? The child is supposed to heal the adult. The child is supposed to, satisfy the needs, the unmet needs of the adult, And years and years and years and years of this, they never changed no matter what we did, They never seek help because they believe they're gods. They believe that whatever they're going through is always the world's fault, And that they're untouchable, they're blameless, and they're entitled to our pain, And when outsiders come in and defend this under the guise of empathy, they're not just being, kind. This is not kindness. This is actually enabling and perpetuating the abuse. They don't realize that when they're telling you not to judge your abuser, they are in fact judging you. If my story or your story was sensationalized, like if there was a police case in the news or a documentary or a movie, there will be outrage, pity, demands for accountability, and they would say, oh my God, poor child, they've been through that house, and how is it possible, and all this stuff, right? Like they did with extreme publicized cases, like Ruby Franke, for example, and Didi Blanchard, right? But when the abuse is covert, hidden behind smiles and family photos and church reputation, money, or YouTube videos preaching morality and family values, these same people see nothing, They don't recognize the red flags waved right in their face, because all they see is the carefully curated public image of the abuser. And many are completely fooled by how narcissists control their appearances and manipulate perception, masking cruelty behind charm, generosity, or righteousness. I can tell you, my father, when I would go to see him and ask for help because of the horrendous abuses my mother was putting me through, okay? And I don't want to talk about that. I talk about that a lot already, so I'm just going to skip to the part where he would bring me to the basement and he would show me videos, childhood videos of me being a baby in my mother's arm and in the swimming pool and that kind of thing, and it was happy and like he would edit these videos to make the family look so fantastic, right? And he has so many videos that he took, where he would take this perfect picture of like a happy family, of me smiling and running in the mountains and holding flowers or whatever, This abuse, it was covert. It's hidden. Anybody looking at the pictures will very easily fall for what they're trying to show. And these empaths will insist on neutrality, they will preach forgiveness, okay? And they will tell you not to judge, all without knowing the depth of your trauma, the ways that your life was completely derailed, or the constant survival that you had to endure. Completely alone, with nobody to help you. And the truth is that the majority of us survivors will never have our stories televised or documented or broadcast, and that's because scapegoat abuse is often hidden. It's subtle and it's psychologically manipulative, okay? And this makes it so difficult to prove. Covert abuse leaves very few visible scars. It relies on gaslighting and isolation, destroying the person from the inside out. And you can't see that. All you see is a person acting out and like popping because they can't take it anymore, And this creates isolation for the scapegoat, and the scapegoat is often, if not always, dismissed by outsiders, and people tell them that, oh, this is just family drama or an exaggeration. And by the time that anybody notices, what's going on, the abuser will have crafted this narrative where the victim just looks like unreliable, oversensitive, or even like the instigator, while they, play the victim, okay? And this is very, very, very hard to explain to people or to prove. And this is why so many survivors are invisible. And why misplaced empathy or moral lectures from outsiders can unintentionally reinforce the trauma instead of validating it. Many empaths think that they're so spiritual and fair, but in reality, they're actually siding with the abuser. And because neutrality in the face of abuse is never actually neutral, it becomes complicity. And here's a few psychological truths. An abuser's story is, or reasoning, is never a green light to harm a child or any family member. So not everyone who hurts others. Okay, this is ridiculous. Claiming otherwise is just an excuse to dismiss accountability and avoid true healing. True healing actually requires self-reflection, responsibility, genuine work on one's wounds. It does not come from blaming or targeting others, okay? And even if an abuser seeks therapy and claims that they want to change, the scapegoat is not obligated to participate in that process, okay? Healing is a solo journey. It's internal. The abuser's progress depends on their level of self-awareness, okay? Their motivation to genuinely want to fix the relationships in their lives and not dominate them, And it depends on accountability as well. And for the scapegoat, involvement in the abuser's healing, it only risks reactivating trauma. Of course it does. Old trauma is going to get reactivated. The caretaking, the fawning, the self-blame, patterns that we learned in childhood, being silenced, or having our feelings be silenced, and not being given permission to grieve, because they will take the center stage once again, And true recovery for anyone requires distance and boundaries and safety, okay? This is paramount. This is like 101, okay? And each person's journey is independent. Your responsibility is to your own safety, your own emotional recovery, and reclaiming your life, not to fix or validate the abuser. Your responsibility is never to guide your abuser through their own awakening, okay? It's to rebuild your own safety, process your own pain, and reclaim your autonomy, And your role is definitely not to fix them. Enough is enough. I'm tired of being told that my role is to fix and appease and calm and shut myself down and shut my pain and my trauma for the sake of my abuser. I'm done with that, And this is exactly the role that we have been given. And when we fail to fix it or heal our abuser, as children, we got punished for it again and again and again and again. That's what was expected of us. We were supposed to, help the abuser deal with whatever was wrong. And when we failed at it, which we always did, it was never enough. And even if they would change, even if they do heal, okay? And let's just imagine this possibility, okay? I say that with a grain of salt, of course, You don't owe participation, forgiveness, or proximity. This is not things that are owned. This is something that you can do if you choose to do it. It's a choice. If it's part of your healing journey, if there's accountability, it's up to you. But it's not your obligation. It's not owed. Personally, I do not feel the need to forgive my mother, because forgiveness to a narcissist is just a green light to keep abusing. And this is a lesson that my mother taught me so well, that I just live by it now. My healing journey belongs to me. It doesn't belong to my mother. It doesn't belong to any person who's ever enabled her. And it also doesn't belong to my husband or my children. Okay, this is my personal journey. And, no one outside your experience, not an empath, not a therapist, not a family friend, has the right to tell you what your healing is supposed to look like. And anyone who pressures you to include your abuser in that process is crossing a fine line, and they can rot in hell. Now, this empathy also has a flip side too. The other side of it is one that has to do with our internal world. Most scapegoats, I think in general, scapegoats are empaths because we've been trained to be empaths. We were trained from childhood to elevate the abuser's pain and suppress our own. This is essentially a scapegoat's upbringing. We were trained to read every mood, to anticipate every outburst, and carry this emotional labor of the entire family on our shoulders. We were basically told all our lives that our abuser's mood and well-being depended on us, and so of course depended on us. And so of course we became so sensitive to reading the room, to making sure everybody around us is comfortable, making sure that, even have this drive to want to save or rescue people, right? This comes from that thought of, if I can understand them, maybe I can control the harm. If I can understand them, maybe I can do something that I couldn't do with my own abusive parent. Maybe I could heal them. Maybe I could fix this. This is your subconscious trying to fix something that you could just never fix in your childhood growing up. True empathy really has to include you in it. Otherwise, it's not empathy, it's enabling, and it's self-abandonment. That's all it is, okay? So really, healing asks you to hold compassion and accountability in the same hand, okay? You can understand that someone's broken, but you don't have to excuse the damage that they caused. And you can prioritize your healing and take care of yourself, and there's nothing wrong with you doing that. You doing what's best for you after trauma, finding safety after trauma, rebuilding your life after trauma without your abuser in your life is the healthy thing to do. And that is the only thing that you can actually control, because you can't control what's in their head. You can't change them. You can't convince them. There's nothing that we can do. And unfortunately, some empaths will find that out the hard way, if they get involved with those people, and if they don't learn to notice the signs and ask questions and be like, I wonder, So doing this, it's not bitterness, it's not selfishness, it's not you being judgmental, it's not you being bad, it's just you healing, and you have every right to do that. And so you can give yourself permission to do that and pay attention to these things. When you notice, this sort of misplaced empathy, pay attention to that and focus on your healing and, block it, get rid of it. Don't let that, sink in and turn into this obligation, responsibility in which you have to sacrifice yourself once again for the sake of morality or for pleasing someone or for the narcissists, so that your abusive parent can have their scapegoat back. If you don't set healthy boundaries for yourself, you will have much, much trouble healing. Well, at least this has been my experience, and I stand by it. And I am very hard. I have a very hard shield when it comes to these things. When you learn to say no, when you stop letting guilt define your choices, when you realize that self-protection is sacred, that's when healing can actually begin. Because empathy that doesn't include you will destroy you. But empathy that includes you will set you free. And so it's so important to become aware of the weight of internalized guilt and shame, because this is such a huge drive behind this people-pleasing and self-sacrifice that prevents us from really healing. The way we experience guilt actually makes no logical sense. We set a boundary, and then we feel like we're a terrible person. We decide we no longer want to have a relationship with somebody who abused us, raised us with a silent treatment, right? So we cut contact, but now we're the traitors for doing an act of self-protection, while they did that to us all our lives as an act of punishment to inflict pain. I mean, go figure. But then we feel guilty about that, right? We decide to no longer respond when we're insulted, screamed at, demeaned, right? When we're spoken to in condescending ways. We gray rock. We're bad. We're passive-aggressive for gray rocking, right? And of course, that turns into self-questioning. We get sick. We develop panic attacks, anxiety disorder, CPTSD. We cut contact with the person who caused it. We are bad. We are guilty. We should be ashamed of ourselves. This is not a coincidence. I mean, if we feel like we were playing these things in our head over and over again, and in one hand we know that the abuse is real, but in the other hand we have this feeling of guilt, like we don't want to see them hurt, we don't want them to suffer because of us, we don't want them to be all alone, we don't want this, we don't want that, and yet, I mean, both of those emotions are valid, like I said, because you do have to protect yourself, and at the same time you do have attachment towards them, and this is very sad, and this is something that you have to grieve. You have to give yourself permission to grieve. We're taught that saying no means punishment or rejection or abandonment, so now our body may confuse peace with danger, and guilt with safety. The scapegoat's nervous system was trained to survive through compliance, okay? Not authenticity. We're trained to survive through compliance. So that's why healing is not just about your emotions, it's physiological as well. we must focus on retraining our body to recognize that safety doesn't require submission. Connection doesn't require submission. And this is also about this compulsion to prove to the world that you're a good person. You will find yourself over-explaining, over-apologizing, trying to prove that, no, you're not the bad one, okay? I'm not bad. And you will scream this off rooftops if you can. And this is the old survival strategy, trying to earn safety by proving to them that you're perfect, that you're good. You have to prove to them, prove to everyone that you're good, And of course, the need to be seen is very deeply human, but your healing begins when you actually stop needing them, to see you and start believing in yourself. Healing starts when you actually realize that you don't need to prove to anyone who you are. You just need to be yourself, And I've learned that silence can actually be your best friend, especially when people refuse to acknowledge how badly they behave and they project their issues onto you no matter what. Then, of course, there's the self-gaslighting, okay? The way that we silence ourselves over and over and over again. I'm not supposed to be angry. That makes me just like them. I'm not supposed to cry. That makes me weak. I'm too sensitive. I'm not supposed to talk about my problems. People will say I'm stuck in the past. I'm not supposed to feel this way. I'm not supposed to feel that way. Why bother trying something because I'm stupid, okay? This is self-gaslighting. This is the internalized voice of your abusers. It's how we keep ourselves small and silent. Scapegoating disconnects us from our body, from our feelings, from our emotions, from our needs, from our wants, okay? We don't trust ourselves anymore. We don't trust our feelings anymore. In fact, a lot of us can be absolutely numb to how we feel inside, It's just numb. There's nothing. And a lot of this comes from the fact that feelings are dangerous, because once upon a time when you were a child or growing up in that system, or if you're still in that system, showing your feelings is dangerous in a narcissistic family system. But emotions don't disappear when they're suppressed. They stay in the body and they shape your reactions, your relationships, your sense of self-worth, and they become like a hum in the background. They become like a hum in the background, and they will sort of come out, in a way that you least expect it, and they will cause a lot of self-sabotage. So, allowing yourself to actually, first of all, to accept how you feel without trying to change anything, allowing yourself to feel what you feel is such a huge part of healing. And this is something that a lot of scapegoats don't allow themselves to do. They will call themselves stupid. Oh, I'm so stupid. I feel this way. I'm so stupid. No, you're not stupid. Allow yourself to feel your feelings and inquire within as to where they come from. But stop suppressing yourself. Stop suppressing your true emotions. Now, another danger for the healing process of the scapegoat survivor is when abusers actually invade our healing spaces. And this happens everywhere. Therapy sessions, support groups, online communities, spiritual workshops, they will enter these spaces. They will dominate conversations. They will twist every topic back to themselves or towards their ideologies, They will give unsolicited advice, minimize real survivors, and use therapeutic language to look like they're enlightened. And sometimes they can even, of course, they become therapists, coaches, psychologists, psychiatrists, healers, themselves, rewriting, their own narrative while continuing to harm their own children or family members, And for scapegoats, seeing an abuser reinvent themselves as a mentor is actually deeply destabilizing. So when it comes to these healing spaces, it's really important that you limit your exposure. If a community or a group includes people with red flags, people that are not safe for you, or anyone that you suspect might be influenced by your family or your abuser, skip it. seek healing elsewhere. Safety is the most important thing when it comes to your healing, and trust your instincts. If someone feels manipulative, controlling, if you're constantly triggered around that person, honor yourself, honor your feeling. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't need to justify how you feel to anyone. If someone's not safe, if a group isn't safe, seek healing elsewhere. It is not healthy for you to remain in a space that keeps re-triggering you. That is not healing, okay? And it's so important to seek professional support beyond your family or your friends or anybody associated with the person who abused you or your narcissistic family system. Your healing cannot rely on people who were entangled with the abuser. It just can't, okay? I really suggest for you to find something completely separate, and you create your own healing bubble very far from any of that. And protect your narrative as you do this. You don't have to share your story with anyone who isn't trained or who isn't safe for you. Your experiences belong to you, and your voice is your own. Your truth. So if anybody invalidates that, you don't need to argue. You can, find a safe space that's healthy for you. Healing is not just going to therapy. It's really creating safe spaces where you can rest, where you can reflect, where you can reclaim your freedom, your autonomy, and discover who you actually are without anybody telling you that you can't do that, or without anybody invalidating you. Now, the last point I'm going to make is about social media and the cultural distortion of narcissism. The internet is obsessed with narcissism, and the term is everywhere. It's mocked, it's diluted, and it's turned into memes. Awareness has grown, which is great, because of course I wouldn't have been able to heal the way that I did or continue working on my healing and progress the way that I did without this knowledge, obviously. But much of the nuance has been lost along the way. For genuine survivors, speaking out can feel impossible because too often they're dismissed and accused of playing victim or labeling everyone as a narcissist. There's a lot of mockery going on. Everybody's a narcissist, and they mock survivors, This isn't awareness, this is trolling at its finest, and it's created a cultural desensitization to the very real trauma that survivors have endured. This is cultural gaslighting, essentially, and it's a reflection of what happened inside your own family system, but now playing out on a collective scale. Naming abuse isn't about demonizing or judging or seeking pity or claiming everyone's a narcissist. It's about clarity. It's about healing. Healing doesn't come from forced neutrality or minimizing your truth, because people are going to mock you for it. It comes from naming what happened, talking about it, speaking with precision and reclaiming your story, okay? Reclaiming your story, reclaiming what happened to you. And if you find yourself discouraged by this distorted narrative, step back from the noise, you have to reconnect in spaces and people who truly get it. Those who understand trauma, those who understand that narcissism is actually a real phenomenon that's happening in this planet right now. A lot of people are suffering, not just inside small families, but globally on a large scale, where you see narcissism fully playing out in leadership and governments. And, the most important thing is to talk about this and to educate ourselves through, valid ways, credible voices, and not through viral trends and memes and that kind of thing, I think it's important for you to protect yourself online as well, and fiercely, and protect your personal life. And this was a mistake that I did in the beginning of my healing journey, because when I first found out when I first discovered narcissism, when I first finally, I mean, I was 30s, mid-30s really, when I found out about, this whole thing and what was really happening and what my mother was and narcissistic family systems, And the first thing I did was shout it out, I went on my social media and I'm like, oh my God, I understand what's going on. It's narcissism, it's narcissistic abuse. It's not my fault. Oh my God, it's not my fault. The friends I lost, the backlash I got. I mean, people publicly shame me on my own social media platform. How can you talk about your mother this way? It's your mother. How can you, People that had no idea. And so I realized, of course, initially when that happened, I thought, okay, my gosh, is it me once again? Because when these things happen, the first thing we do is we doubt ourselves. But then after some time, I realized, okay, no, this is just, now I'm realizing who is actually safe and unsafe. For me, I took that as an important lesson. And in the end, actually, I kept almost no one. I mean, I think I have two people in my life. There's two adults in my life that have been there with me through the whole thing that are still here. And, everybody that I've known, has basically disappeared from my life, because of this. And it's made me realize that I need to stay anchored in my reality no matter what happens around me. I don't need to convince anyone of what happened behind closed doors, what that woman did to me. I don't need to prove my pain to anyone. I can pass on what I learned, and I can be there for those who need me, who need someone to understand, who has been there. But the most important thing is knowing that our truth is valid simply because it's ours, and that's it, So the main thing I want to take away from this today is that healing isn't just about cutting ties. It's not enough. It's about deprogramming an identity that was never yours. It's about reclaiming your empathy, from those who misuse it, and giving yourself the empathy that you need, and disconnecting from anybody who really invalidates your story and re-triggers your trauma over and over again. People who don't understand narcissistic abuse, people who side with your abuser because of morality or ethics or religion or whatever, distance yourself from people who rewrite your truth, okay, and who make peace impossible, really, to make your freedom impossible. And do not mistake your need for peace and self-love and self-empathy, for something bad, because it's not. It's something that's needed. It's something that must happen in order for healing to take its course properly. And remember to grieve what you need to grieve. Don't disconnect yourself from your emotions, but give yourself some safe spaces to feel what you feel, And remember that when you do these things and when you tell your truth, loneliness will come first, okay? Loneliness comes in the territory of healing from being scapegoated by a narcissistic family system. But there is also freedom that's going to walk very closely behind you. So remember, healing is not about becoming someone new, but it's actually about rediscovering who you actually really are for the first time without, anybody dictating what your healing should look like, or what your life should look like. This is all about listening to your own voice for the first time and making your voice so loud that you will never doubt yourself or feel guilty for doing the right thing and for protecting yourself and for prioritizing your healing ever again. I hope this helped you. And remember, I love myself, I trust myself. I see you soon.